The air signs. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. All the air signs want to understand life through mental perception, thought, and ideas. All of them need to detach themselves from intense experience and to attain a perspective on life through reason, reflection, and analysis. Air is the mental and intellectual life energy that manifests as a fascination with ideas, abstractions, and with words and language in general. In fact, a key to understanding the air sign's motivation is to realize that concepts are real things to them, more real as a motivating force in their lives than are emotions or practical considerations. This often gives these people admirable idealism, but also sometimes too great a dependence on thinking to solve all problems. To feel comfortable, air signs need to feel that they have things figured out. We might put that in quotes. In other words, to have all their theories and abstract ideas nicely in order. Otherwise, they're easily driven to distraction. Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius all need to verbalize and to communicate with others. They are, in fact, the most people-oriented signs by far. They see others as persons, not as things. And they often have a genuine interest in the other person's thoughts. And this capacity for sharing thoughts is probably their greatest strength. Now we'll talk about each individual air sign in considerable detail. The sign Gemini, the sign of the twins, also known as the sign of the inventor, reflecting the ingenuity, cleverness, and manual dexterity of Gemini. This is the first of the air signs, and the planet Mercury is traditionally associated with this sign. The most common key word for Gemini is I think, revealing how these people identify with the constant stream of their thoughts. In fact, the image of the twins can be seen as the two sides of their own mind, always arguing with each other. Another key word that is equally accurate to describe the psychology of Gemini is I question, which reflects how Gemini is always asking why about everything. They are, in fact, often more intent on asking the questions than on listening to the answers. Geminis are often possessed by their mind's insatiable inquisitiveness. And it's a common experience for people when speaking with Geminis to find that just as they begin answering the Gemini's question, the Gemini interrupts to answer another one. So what motivates Gemini? One of the most powerful motivating factors in all their actions is this powerful curiosity about people, places, ideas, and things. They have an urge to know what others are thinking, which leads them to emphasize communication with people in all areas of lives and with all kinds of people. Travel and an interest in language, including foreign languages, are also common Gemini preoccupations and can be seen as further methods of indulging their curiosity about life. In short, Geminis need to make connections in life. Connections between facts, between ideas, and between themselves and others. Their need to communicate leads Geminis to be the friendliest sign of the zodiac. It has been said that Gemini has lots of friends and no enemies, since no one interests them long enough to become an enemy. The psychological nature of Gemini can be characterized as intellectual, lively, vacillating, friendly, but often emotionally cold, constantly changeable, and extremely verbal, and outstandingly expressive through speech. Rather undependable in many cases, Geminis are nevertheless often still endearing in their childlike irresponsibility and openness. They have a strong need for variety, and in fact are often lacking in persistence and self-discipline. They hate boring routine, and they rebel against it instinctively. Geminis need a lifestyle and a type of work that allows a broad scope of experience and a great deal of variety, so that they don't feel like a bird in a cage. Gemini is an air sign after all, and it needs the freedom to soar. Perhaps the greatest strength of Gemini is their versatility, their ability to deal with equal skill with many types of activities, to collect an amazingly broad variety of facts, and then amazingly enough to have them accessible at all times in their memory bank. And also then, included in this versatility is the capacity to interact with virtually all types of human beings with a genuine interest and openness. One writer summed up Gemini like so: Geminis are often charming, and it is their true function in life to make life more interesting and more beautiful for themselves and for others. The sign Libra, the sign of the scales, also known as the sign of the diplomat and as the sign of partnership and or marriage. This is the second of the air signs, and the planet Venus is associated with Libra. Its traditional key word is I balance, revealing how these people identify with establishing harmony and justice, both in the world of ideas and also between human beings. And in the area of human relationship, they seek harmony and justice, both in one-to-one partnerships and in the broader sphere of social justice. However, other keywords are equally accurate to describe Libra's psychology, such as I harmonize, showing their keen sensitivity to beauty and aesthetics. They're very sensitive to any sign of discord in their environment, and they must have harmonious surroundings to bring out their best. And then the other keyword is I relate, which describes Libra's great capacity to give and take with others in close interactions. Libra is the sign of partnership, and in fact, a Libra without some kind of close partner, either marriage partner, living partner, working partner, business partner, becomes lifeless. Libras must have a partner, and their sense of self-confidence often dwindles rapidly if they lack one, or if the partner they have is gone for quite a while. Libras, therefore, are very dependent on others for input and to help them sustain their self-confidence. They are also dependent on others for self-knowledge and even for increasing their own vitality. Now, what motivates Libra? One of the most powerful motivating factors in their actions, other than the continuous need for sharing and partnership, is an almost religious sense of fairness. They hate all forms of injustice. They themselves, therefore, are usually scrupulously honest with money and also careful and fair in carrying out their obligations and responsibilities. In their relationships also, they want fairness to be the main guiding principle. Idealistic, humane, refined, logical, careful, and kind also describe Libra's basic psychological nature. They are also known for being very unaggressive. Mahatma Gandhi, for example, was a Libra, and he became famous as the apostle of nonviolence. Now, we also cannot omit mentioning Libra's romantic streak. They are not only dependent on partnership, but they are so dependent that, more than any other sign, Libra is in love with love itself. Libras are also often characterized accurately as horribly indecisive, since they weigh everything in their mental scales, sometimes over and over again. It is, however, sometimes almost shocking to others when they decide that some people and things just don't measure up. And then their indecision can become suddenly almost a ruthless decisiveness. Libras have a strong tendency to try to be all things to all people. They find it hard to say no and will do almost anything for peace and harmony and to avoid unpleasantness. Libras often are accused of seeking peace at any price. One might say that Libra's chief failing is that they are too easily influenced by others and too impressionable. But that is the other side of the coin from their greatest strength, namely, the ability to see the other person's point of view, often even more clearly than they see their own point of view, and sometimes even at the cost of their own self-interest. No other sign can see the other's point of view as clearly as can Libra. The sign Aquarius, the sign of the water bearer, also known as the sign of the scientist in the true sense of the word, someone who seeks knowledge through objective experimentation. This is the third of the air signs, which may surprise some people. It is not a water sign, although it is the sign of the water bearer. Many people think that Aquarius is a water sign. All the air signs are detached, but Aquarius is the most detached and airy of all. The planet Uranus is the modern ruling planet of Aquarius, as it's called, but Saturn is the planet traditionally associated with this sign. Also, it might be said that Uranus is now regarded as the astrological planet, and the Uranus sign of Aquarius is probably the sign most often involved or intrigued with astrology. The traditional keyword for Aquarius is "I know," revealing how these people identify with what they definitely know. And at best, they also know what they don't know, which then makes some Aquarians more humble as well as more humorous than others. As long as Aquarians think they know everything, as some do, they take themselves much too seriously. However, another keyword that is equally accurate to describe the psychology of Aquarius is I revolutionize, which is the result of their constantly insisting on independence and freedom of expression, as well as the natural outcome of their sincere seeking for truth. This seeking leads them to break through all sorts of taboos and to depart from tradition and precedent. Their sympathy for the masses and for the underprivileged also often leads them to revolutionary ideas in politics. What motivates Aquarius? One of the most powerful motivating factors in all their actions is their inborn feeling for the importance of freedom. Freedom of behavior and freedom of thought. They have an urge to experiment in life, in both behavior and thought, in order to discover what is uniquely right for them. And they usually acknowledge other people's right to do the same. However, although Aquarius at its best is tolerant, broad-minded, unassuming, and humanitarian, one does see Aquarians quite often who are fanatical and obstinate in their opinions. Aquarius is a sign of extremes, and Aquarius people do often hold rigidly to extreme ideas. In addition, their insistence on independence leads them often to eccentric behavior that many people consider extreme. In the psychology of every Aquarian is a creative and inventive streak. In other words, a flair for doing something in an entirely new way. As mentioned before, Aquarians like to experiment, and this holds true in everything they do. There's always something individualistic and unique about Aquarians. They have a strong need for involvement in social welfare, humanitarian, and philanthropic issues, and a desire to serve and change society is therefore not uncommon. Perhaps the greatest strength of Aquarius is their loyalty, a personal commitment to a friend, to a society, to a quest, or to a cause that they do not give up easily. But while maintaining that loyalty, they still retain the unbiased perspective that enables them to change their viewpoint, even in a radical way, if they become convinced of a more comprehensive truth. Next, we will discuss the water signs. Water signs. The water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. In all the water signs, emotional sensitivity and strong feeling responses are predominant, even if not obvious at first. In fact, the water signs are the most private and secretive signs of the zodiac. They all live within themselves, feeling that they must protect themselves from outside influences in order to achieve a feeling of security, as well as to attain emotional tranquility. In spite of their need for privacy, however, they also deeply need emotional involvement with others. Not only as a way of expressing their emotions, but also as a way of using the healing qualities of empathy and caring, which the water energy contributes to their psychological makeup. The water energy is also the most psychically sensitive element, which enables people to tune into subtleties that others don't even notice. However, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces can also sometimes be oversensitive, with the result that a healthy sensitivity can turn negative and become an oppressive fearfulness and a tendency to expect the worst. A key to understanding the motivations of the water signs is to realize that deep emotions and yearnings are more real for them than anything else in life. This deep, partially unconscious realm of life is essentially so deep that it's non-verbal, and so the water signs need ways to express themselves that are beyond words. However, we will now try to explore the water signs one by one using words. The sign Cancer, the sign of the crab. Like the crab, Cancer often appears hard-shelled, or like they were wearing a mask, but they are soft and vulnerable underneath. Cancer is also known as the sign of the home, or as the sign of the mother. It is the first of the water signs, and the moon is associated with it. The traditional keyword for Cancer is I feel, revealing how these people identify with their emotions and deeper intuitive reactions. Sometimes Cancer people are so influenced, in fact, by the emotional patterns of the past that I suspect I fear would be a more accurate keyword. Cancer people are very conservative, careful, and like the crab, which moves sideways and backwards, Cancers are indirect and evasive. They avoid confrontation and risk whenever possible. Other keywords are equally accurate to describe the psychology of Cancer, such as I remember. This shows how Cancer has the best memory in the zodiac, and in fact can never forget anything from the past, especially a hurt. And also, I establish is an appropriate keyword for Cancer, which describes how Cancer people so often pour their energies into setting up their own small worlds, whether it is a new family or a new business that they create. What motivates Cancer? One of the most powerful motivating factors in all their actions is the need to feel safe and secure with familiar and trusted surroundings. This is especially important for Cancers because they do not easily trust others. They have an urge to find a protected area of life for both their work and their home life. They're very sensitive and are badly affected physically and emotionally by very much stress in the environment. Nurturing, sympathetic, imaginative, moody, introspective, and shy describe Cancer's inner psychological nature, even if the outer personality seems to be that cold, hard shell of the crab. And they are also known for tenacity of purpose and of memory. We mentioned how Cancer does not let go of memory. But what is overlooked very often in books about Cancer is that Cancer, in fact, is far more intent on getting what they want than they seem. They like to have influence over others, and in fact, they mold others subtly and quietly. They play on people like a piano, and can, in fact, be very manipulative. They just keep their intentions secret, sometimes secret even from themselves. This strong need to mold other people can, of course, take many positive forms, such as teaching and guiding young people. And Cancer is very often especially talented at working with kids. Cancer's affinity for the past cannot be left underemphasized. Not only do they remember everything and have a fondness for family traditions and security feelings, but they like old things in general. They usually collect something, and they're often especially appreciative of antiques. Perhaps the greatest strength of Cancer, often called the sign of the home, is that it has within itself the emotional reserves that can provide a home base for other people's development or for a new enterprise. And this capacity is both supportive and nurturing to others beyond even what the Cancer person may realize. The only things that prevent the creative use of their emotional reservoir are fear and stinginess. But when Cancer shows generosity of spirit, they are incomparable friends. The sign Scorpio, the sign of the scorpion, also known as the sign of the reformer, since they reform or transform the status quo so often, and as the sign of the detective, since Scorpios are so good at discovering hidden secrets. This is the second of the water signs. Even though Scorpio is a sign of intensity and power, it is not a fire sign as many people believe. The planet Mars is traditionally associated with Scorpio, but in modern times, the distant planet Pluto has also been regarded as closely associated with this sign. The traditional keyword is I desire, revealing how these people identify with the intensity of passions that they feel within themselves. The sexiest and the subtlest sign in the zodiac, and one of the strongest, Scorpio's passions are not limited to erotic and competitive activities. They are also capable of passionate devotion to a cause or to other people. Another keyword that equally describes the psychology of Scorpio is I delve, or you could say I probe, which describes how Scorpio seeks to penetrate into the secrets of life, into the underlying causes of things, and into the motives of other people. They also probe into the hidden forces of nature, such as sex, the physical and occult sciences, and psychology. They are known not only as natural detectives, but also as effective researchers in any field. What motivates Scorpio? One of the most powerful motivating factors in their actions is a compulsion to be exhaustively thorough and to let nothing escape their discovery. Their analytical mind and psychic sense often do let them detect a lot, but they also often develop a chronic suspicion that some secret is being withheld. They have an urge to penetrate to the core of reality. And their remarkable powers of concentration and unflagging determination and energy, along with keen psychic intuition, enable them to rapidly get to the bottom of anything they investigate. The psychological nature of Scorpio is extremely complex and even contradictory. Courage combined with fearfulness, often verging on paranoia. Intense passion vies with an obsessive desire for self-control. Compassion coexists with a tendency toward vengeance. For this reason, Scorpios are often characterized as boiling cauldrons of emotion. And this is why Scorpios seek to attain a profound level of self-control and to emphasize keeping their feelings totally private. And yet, Scorpios cannot effectively hide their feelings, as everyone around them knows, even if they don't know it. Their emotions are too powerful to hide and always leak out into the atmosphere. Scorpios prefer to remain inscrutable and are proud of their absolute command of feature and expression, or so they think. They also secretly think that they're reading everyone else like a book and seeing everyone else's weakness while not revealing their own. However, this obsession with self-control is often at least partly a self-deception, and their emotional intensity makes it backfire when they eventually explode in frustration. Because Scorpios have a strong tendency to hide their inborn emotional sensitivity, they build many defensive barriers to protect themselves. They barely resent criticism from others, although Scorpio itself is extremely critical and is undoubtedly the second most critical sign of the zodiac after Virgo. The tendency to lash out at others is a good example of the Scorpio principle: the best defense is a good offense. Perhaps the greatest strength of Scorpio is the ability to draw on their deep reserves of power to express a quiet, resolute, but unconquerable strength. A strength that comes out most prominently when confronting a direct emergency or an apparently hopeless task. Scorpio needs to be challenged, and it is then that this sign is capable of its most positive expression. The sign of Pisces, the sign of the fish, also known as the sign of the poet or the mystic. Note that both the poet and the mystic deal with a world, either imagination or spirit, that is beyond the physical world, and this is a keynote of the sign Pisces. Pisces is the third of the water signs, and Jupiter, traditionally, is associated with it. In modern times, Neptune has been recognized as this sign's primary planetary relationship, however. The traditional keyword for Pisces is I believe, revealing how these people identify with something beyond the everyday world that we see and perceive with the physical senses. Pisces yearns to experience something transcendent, something profound and all-encompassing that enables them to feel at one with life. Another keyword that also describes the psychology of Pisces is I escape, showing the strong need in every Pisces to escape from the limits of humdrum reality and from the restrictions of their personality by one means or another, whether through imagination, art, music, selfless service to others, through drink or drugs, or through religious or psychic or mystical experience. Whatever path is taken, and Pisces usually experiments with many as they go through life, Pisces always seeks something that is ultimately emotionally satisfying. What motivates Pisces? One of the most powerful motivating factors in all of their actions is the constant need for freedom of the inner self so that they can dream and explore and grow according to their own inner nature. If they have this inner freedom, outer restrictions or even deprivations leave them relatively unaffected. This urge for inner freedom leads them to explore all kinds of emotional experiences. And some Pisces will drift from one thing to another for many years, with little planning for the future and with no concern for security. This varied life experience eventually enables many Pisces people to develop a wider knowledge and deeper consciousness than many who have led more narrow and restricted lives. The sympathy, tolerance, and compassion that invariably are inborn Pisces qualities can, through such broad experience of life, blossom to even fuller expression and thus enable Pisces people to understand and help others more effectively. The psychological nature of Pisces can be further described as idealistic, gentle, often shy, although usually quite interested in others, sensitive, even hypersensitive, self-sacrificing, and often vague and confused, since they have trouble discriminating, and they feel their way through life, waiting for promptings from within or without, rather than taking the initiative. This vagueness of mind also comes from the psychological openness that characterizes Pisces. Pisces is a very intuitive and psychically sensitive sign. They follow their inner promptings more than logic. And this psychic openness makes them both sensitive to others and also indecisive and sometimes extremely changeable. They have a strong yearning for completion, for a sense of inner satisfaction that gives inspiring meaning to life. And once they find this inner fulfillment, then one sees Pisces expressing their greatest strength, namely their capacity to inspire, support, uplift, and heal others. They have a strong desire to help others, and they are humble enough that they can put the other person before themselves. This concludes our tour through the 12 signs of the zodiac. Because the information on this tape is rather concentrated due to our time constraints, and therefore I have not been able to elaborate on many of these ideas, it is probably advisable that you listen to this tape again, perhaps stopping it now and then to reflect on some of the statements. Remember, all of us have more than just the sun sign in our psychological makeup, and most of us have at least 3 signs in our horoscope that are especially dominant, and sometimes even more than 3. Each of us is a unique combination of these basic cosmic psychological principles. So a brief introduction to the psychological principles of the signs, like we've presented here, just scratches the surface of the abundance of insight and understanding of human nature that modern psychological astrology can provide.